Dying Cowboy asked for water, until the widow saw his hand and screamed. The sun was dying when she heard the sound. It came soft at first, a scrape of boot leather against dry earth, the low groan of a man who had no strength left to hide his pain. Clara Brennan stood at the edge of her porch, a wooden ladle still in her hand, her apron dusty from a long day of work that never seemed to end. The wind moved through the plains like a tired whisper, carrying with it the smell of sage and distant rain that would never come. She squinted into the fading light and saw him. A man, a cowboy, by the look of him. Hat knocked loose, coat torn at the shoulder, boots scuffed beyond repair. He was leading no horse. He carried no saddle. He moved like a ghost, each step slower than the last, and when he reached the fence line that bordered her land, he stopped. His knees buckled. His hand reached out for the post, missed it, and he fell forward into the dust. Clara's heart clenched in her chest. She did not move at first. Out here, a woman alone learned to be careful. A stranger could be a drifter looking for shelter. Or he could be an outlaw running from a rope. Or worse, he could be one of the men who rode through towns like locusts, taking what they wanted and leaving nothing but ash and grief behind. But then she heard it again. That sound. A low, broken exhale that was not quite a word, not quite a breath. It was the sound of a man leaving the world. She set the ladle down and walked toward him. Her boots crunched over the dry grass. The evening air was cool now, though the ground still held the heat of the day. She reached the fence and knelt beside him, her knees pressing into the dirt. His face was turned to the side, half hidden beneath the brim of his hat. His shirt was stained dark with blood, old blood, dried and cracked like clay. Newer blood too, wet and glistening near his ribs. "Mister," she said quietly, "can you hear me?" He did not answer. His chest rose and fell in shallow, uneven pulls. His lips were cracked and pale. Clara hesitated. Then she reached out and gently pushed the hat back from his face. He was younger than she expected. Maybe 30. Maybe less. His jaw was covered in dust and stubble. His skin burned dark by the sun. There was a scar along his cheekbone, thin and old, like a memory carved into flesh. His eyes were closed, but his brow was tight with pain. She looked around. The road was empty. The sky was empty. There was no one coming to help him, no one coming to save him. And so she made her choice. Clara stood and hurried back to the house. She grabbed a tin cup from the kitchen table, filled it with water from the bucket by the door, and returned to him. She knelt again, closer this time, and slipped one arm beneath his shoulders. He was heavier than he looked. Dead weight, her father used to call it. The weight of a man who could not help himself. "I've got you," she whispered, though she did not know if he could hear her. "Just a little water. That's all." She pressed the cup to his lips and tilted it. Water spilled over his mouth, down his chin, soaking into the collar of his shirt. But some of it went in. She saw his throat move, saw him swallow. His eyes opened. They were brown, dark and glassy, like river stones. They searched her face with a kind of confusion, as if he could not understand where he was, or why someone was being kind to him. His lips parted, and he tried to speak, but no sound came out. "Don't talk," Clara said. "Save your strength." She pulled the cup back and set it down in the dirt. Then she reached for his hand, the one lying limp at his side, and gently turned it over so she could see the wound. There was blood crusted along his palm, dirt packed into the creases of his skin. She would need to clean it, bandage it, do what she could before infection set in. But when she lifted his hand into the last light of the sun, she stopped. Her breath caught. Her fingers went cold. There, burned into the back of his hand, was a scar. Not a cut, not a scratch. A brand, twisted and deliberate, like a cattle mark pressed into human skin. It was shaped like a crooked cross, or maybe a broken star. She had seen it only once before in her life. 3 years ago. The night they came. The night they kicked in her door and dragged her husband out into the yard. The night she stood on the porch with a rifle she did not know how to use, screaming his name while the men in masks laughed and called him a thief. The night one of them held a torch to the barn, and another put a gun to Samuel's head and pulled the trigger. She had seen that mark on the hand of the man who held the torch. The same mark. The exact same shape. Clara's hands began to shake. The world around her seemed to tilt and narrow. Her vision blurred at the edges. She looked down at the man lying in the dust, this stranger she had pulled from the dirt, this dying cowboy she had given water, and her chest filled with something cold and sharp and impossible to name. He opened his eyes again, looked at her, and in that moment she knew. He knew too. The scream came before she could stop it. It tore out of her throat like something wild and wounded, a sound she did not recognize as her own. The tin cup fell from her other hand and rolled across the ground, spilling water into the dust. She jerked back, stumbling to her feet, her whole body shaking. The man did not move. He only looked at her with those dark, tired eyes. And said nothing. Clara ran. She stumbled back toward the house, her boots kicking up dust, her breath coming in short, panic gasps. The porch steps creaked beneath her weight as she climbed them and pushed through the door. Inside, the shadows were thick and cool. The air smelled of soap and firewood and the faint sweetness of bread she had baked that morning. But none of it felt real. None of it felt safe. She crossed the room to the corner, where Samuel's rifle still leaned against the wall. She had not touched it in months, maybe longer. Her hands shook as she lifted it, feeling the weight of the wood and steel, the cold metal of the barrel. It was heavier than she remembered. Or maybe she was weaker now. She turned and walked back outside. The sun had slipped below the horizon, leaving only a thin band of orange light stretched across the edge of the world. The rest of the sky was bruised purple and gray. The wind had died. Everything was still. The man had not moved. He lay where she had left him, his body half propped against the fence post, his head tilted back. His eyes were open, watching her. He did not speak, did not plead, did not try to explain. He only looked at her with those dark, tired eyes and waited. Clara stopped a few feet away and raised the rifle. Her hands were still shaking. She gripped the stock tighter, pressed the butt against her shoulder the way Samuel had taught her years ago. She could feel her heartbeat in her throat, could taste the bitterness of fear and anger on her tongue. "You were there," she said. Her voice was low and rough, like something dragged across stone. "That night, you were one of them." The man did not deny it. He closed his eyes for a moment, as if the weight of her words was too much to hold. Then he opened them again and nodded. Just once. Slow and deliberate. "Yes," he said. The word hung in the air between them like smoke. Clara's finger moved to the trigger. She could feel the curve of it beneath her skin. One pull. That was all it would take. One pull, and the man who had helped destroy her life would be gone. Justice, some would call it. Revenge, others might say. But out here, on the edge of nowhere, there was no sheriff to ask. No judge to decide. Only her. Only this moment. Only the choice she would have to live with when the sun rose again. But she did not pull the trigger. "Why?" she asked. The word came out broken. "Why did you come here?" The man's chest rose and fell. His breathing was shallow, labored. Blood had soaked through the front of his shirt, spreading dark and wet across his ribs. He was dying. She could see it in the way his skin had gone pale, in the way his hands trembled when he tried to move them. "I didn't know," he said. His voice was barely a whisper. "Didn't know this was your place. I was just trying to get somewhere. Anywhere." "You're lying." "No." He shook his head, slow and painful. "I swear it. I didn't know." Clara's jaw tightened. She wanted to believe he was lying, wanted to believe he had come here on purpose, to finish what he and his gang had started. Because if that were true, then pulling the trigger would be easy. Simple. Right. But the way he looked at her, the way his eyes held nothing but exhaustion and something close to shame, made her doubt. "You remember me," she said. It was not a question. The man was silent for a long moment. Then he nodded again. "Yes," he said. "I remember." "Then you remember my husband, Samuel Brennan." The name came out slow, like it hurt to say. I remember. Clara's breath hitched. Hearing his name spoken aloud, spoken by one of the men who had taken him from her, felt like a blade twisting in her chest. She blinked hard, trying to force the tears back, but they came anyway, hot and stinging, sliding down her cheeks. He didn't steal anything, she said. Her voice cracked. He didn't do what they said he did. I know. The words were quiet, almost too quiet to hear. Clara stared at him. What? The man's head sagged forward. He pressed one hand against his side, where the blood was worst, and grimaced. When he spoke again, his voice was rough and filled with pain. He didn't steal from a rancher, he said. It was one of us. One of the men I rode with. He took the cattle and blamed your husband. We all went along with it. We all knew. The rifle wavered in Clara's hands. You knew, she repeated. The words felt hollow, empty. You knew he was innocent, and you still, yes. She wanted to scream, wanted to throw the rifle down and beat her fists against the ground until her hands bled. But instead, she stood there frozen, staring at the man who had helped murder her husband and was now confessing it like a prayer. Why didn't you stop them? She asked. The man looked up at her. His face was tight with shame. I tried, he said. When they dragged him out into the yard, I told them to wait. Told them we should take him to the sheriff. Let the law decide. But they didn't listen. They were drunk, angry. They wanted blood. So you let them kill him. I didn't pull the trigger. His voice was stronger now, though still weak. I swear to God, I didn't pull the trigger. But you didn't stop it either. The man said nothing. Because there was nothing to say. She was right, and they both knew it. Clara's arms ached from holding the rifle. Her whole body felt heavy, like she was carrying the weight of the sky. She wanted to hate him, wanted to feel nothing but rage and the cold satisfaction of revenge. But standing there, looking down at this broken cowboy who could barely breathe, she felt something else too. Something worse. Pity. What's your name? She asked. The man blinked, surprised by the question. Caleb, he said. Caleb Hayes. Where are the others? The men you rode with. Gone. He coughed, and a thin line of blood appeared at the corner of his mouth. Dead, most of them. Hanged. Shot. One got sick and died in a ditch outside Amarillo. I'm the last one left. Good, Clara said. But the word felt hollow. Caleb looked at her with those dark, tired eyes. I don't blame you, he said. If you want to shoot me, I don't blame you. Clara's finger hovered over the trigger, but she did not pull it. Instead, she lowered the rifle and let it hang at her side. She stood there in the fading light, staring at the man who had destroyed her life and was now lying at her feet, dying slowly in the dust. I should, she whispered. I know, and yet she did not. Clara brought him inside. She did not know why. She told herself it was because the night was coming and the coyotes would come with it. Told herself it was because leaving a dying man in the dirt, even one who deserved it, was not something she could live with. But the truth was harder to name. The truth sat heavy in her chest, like a stone she could not swallow. She dragged him through the door, one arm hooked beneath his shoulders, his boots scraping across the wooden floor. He was heavier than he looked, and she was not strong. By the time she got him to the old rope bed in the corner of the room, her arms were shaking and her breath came in ragged gasps. She lowered him onto the mattress, and he groaned, his head falling back against the thin pillow. Stay still, she said. He did not argue. Clara lit the oil lamp on the table and carried it closer. The light flickered across his face, casting shadows beneath his eyes, along the hollow of his cheeks. He looked worse now than he had outside. His skin was pale and damp with sweat. His lips were cracked and bloodless. She could see the fever beginning to set in, the way his body trembled, the way his eyes struggled to focus. She fetched water and clean rags from the kitchen. She pulled his coat off, then his shirt, peeling the fabric away from the wound at his side. The bullet had gone through, she realized, clean through the flesh, just below his ribs. It was a mercy in a way. If it had stayed in, he would have been dead already. But the exit wound was ugly, torn and ragged, and she could see the red edges of infection beginning to creep in. Clara worked in silence. She cleaned the wound as best she could, pressed the cleanest rag against it, and wrapped strips of torn linen around his torso to hold it in place. He did not cry out, did not flinch. He only lay there, staring up at the ceiling, his jaw tight with pain. When she finished, she stepped back and wiped her hands on her apron. They were stained red. "You'll live," she said quietly. "Maybe." Caleb turned his head to look at her. "Thank you." She did not respond. She did not want his gratitude. Clara sat down in the chair by the bed, the rifle still within reach, propped against the wall. She crossed her arms and watched him. The silence stretched between them, thick and uncomfortable. Outside, the wind had picked up again, rattling the shutters, carrying with it the distant howl of something wild. "Tell me," she said at last. "Tell me what happened that night. All of it." Caleb closed his eyes. For a moment, she thought he might refuse. But then he began to speak. "There were 6 of us," he said. His voice was low and rough, like gravel shifting in a dry riverbed. Drifters mostly. Men who had nowhere else to go. We worked odd jobs, ranch work, cattle drives, whatever paid. We weren't outlaws. Not at first. Clara said nothing. She waited. The rancher who owned the land north of here, big man, cruel man. He accused your husband of stealing from him. Said Samuel took 2 head of cattle and sold them in the next town over. Caleb paused, his breath shallow. It wasn't true. It was one of us. A man named Garrett. He took the cattle and pocketed the money. But when the rancher came looking, Garrett pointed the finger at Samuel. Clara's hands tightened into fists. "And you let him." "I didn't know at first," Caleb said. "Not until later. By then, it was too late. The rancher wanted justice. Wanted someone to pay. He hired us to ride out here and bring Samuel in. Said he'd pay us $20 each if we did it quick and quiet." "So you came for the money?" "Yes." Caleb's voice cracked. "God help me, yes." Clara felt the tears burning behind her eyes again, but she refused to let them fall. She dug her nails into her palms and focused on the pain. "We rode out here at night," Caleb continued. "Knocked on your door." Samuel answered. He didn't fight, didn't run. He just stood there and asked what we wanted. Garrett told him he was a thief, and Samuel said he wasn't. Said he'd never stolen anything in his life. But Garrett didn't care. Neither did the others. They dragged him outside. And you did nothing. Caleb opened his eyes and looked at her. "I told them to stop," he said. "I told them we should take him to the sheriff. Let the law handle it." But they were drunk, angry. They said the rancher wanted it done tonight. Said if we waited, Samuel might run. "So you let them kill him." I tried to stop it. His voice rose, desperate now. When Garrett pulled his gun, I grabbed his arm. Told him not to do it. But one of the other men, a big man named Dutch, he hit me. Knocked me down. By the time I got up, it was over. Samuel was on the ground, and you were screaming. Clara's vision blurred. She could still hear it. Her own voice, raw and broken, calling her husband's name into the darkness. She could still see his body lying in the dirt, the blood pooling beneath him, the way his hand had reached out toward her before going still. "I didn't pull the trigger," Caleb said again. "I swear to you I didn't." "But you were there." Clara's voice was cold. "You rode with them. You took the money." Caleb said nothing, because it was true. The silence settled over them again, heavy and suffocating. Clara stood and walked to the window. She stared out into the night, her arms wrapped around herself. She could see her reflection in the glass, a ghost of the woman she used to be. "Why didn't you go to the sheriff after?" she asked. "Why didn't you tell someone the truth?" "I tried," Caleb said, "but the rancher paid the sheriff to look the other way. And the men I rode with, they made it clear what would happen if I talked. So I ran, left the territory, kept moving, tried to forget. But you didn't forget." "No." Clara turned back to him. "You've been carrying this for 3 years." Caleb nodded. His eyes were wet now, glistening in the lamplight. "Every day," he whispered. every single day. She walked back to the bed and looked down at him. Then why come back? Why come anywhere near here? I wasn't trying to come back, he said. I got shot 2 days ago. Different town, different fight. I was just riding. Trying to find somewhere to stop. Somewhere to die, maybe. I didn't know this was your place. I swear it. Clara stared at him for a long moment. Then her eyes moved to his coat, still lying crumpled on the floor where she had dropped it. Something about it caught her attention. A bulge in the inside pocket, the corner of something white peeking out. She knelt and reached for it. Don't, Caleb started to say, but she had already pulled it free. It was a letter. The paper was old and worn, folded and refolded, so many times the creases had begun to tear. The ink was faded in places, smudged by water or sweat. But the words were still there, still readable. Clara unfolded it slowly. At the top, in rough, unsteady handwriting, were 2 words, Mrs. Brennan. Her breath caught. She read, I don't know if you'll ever see this. I don't know if I'll ever have the courage to send it. But I need to write it down. Need to say it, even if no one ever hears. I was there the night your husband died. I was one of the men who came to your door. I didn't pull the trigger, but I didn't stop it either. I stood there and let it happen. And I've been carrying that weight ever since. Your husband was innocent. He didn't steal anything. It was one of us. A man named Garrett. He lied, and we believed him, and Samuel paid the price. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I know those words don't mean anything. I know they can't bring him back. But I need you to know the truth. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't deserve it. I just wanted you to know that he was a good man. And that what happened to him was wrong. I'm sorry. Caleb Hayes. Clara's hands trembled. The letter slipped from her fingers and fell to the floor. She looked at Caleb, and for the first time since he had collapsed at her fence, she saw him not as a killer, but as a man. A broken, haunted man who had been running from his own guilt for 3 years. And she did not know what to feel. The night passed slowly. Clara sat in the chair beside the bed, the letter folded in her lap, her hands resting on top of it like a prayer she did not know how to say. The oil lamp burned low, casting long shadows across the walls. Outside, the wind had died again, leaving only silence, the kind of silence that felt alive, pressing in from all sides. Caleb drifted in and out of fever. Sometimes he slept. Sometimes he muttered words she could not understand. Once he called out a name, Garrett, and his hand reached out into the darkness as if trying to stop something that had already happened. Clara did not touch him. She only watched. She thought about the letter. She thought about Samuel. She thought about the 3 years she had spent hating men whose faces she had never seen, whose names she had never known. And now one of them was here, dying in her house, and she did not know what to do with the weight of it. When the first light of dawn began to creep through the window, pale and gray, Caleb opened his eyes. He looked at her, and for a moment there was clarity in his gaze. Recognition. Understanding. You're still here, he said. His voice was barely a whisper. Yes, Clara said. Why? She did not answer right away. She looked down at the letter in her lap, then back at him. I don't know, she said honestly. Caleb's chest rose and fell in shallow, labored breaths. His skin was pale as ash, and his lips had taken on a faint blue tinge. She could see the life leaving him, slow and steady, like water draining from a cracked basin. I'm dying, he said. It was not a question. Yes, Clara said again. He nodded, as if he had expected it, as if he had been expecting it for a long time. Good, he whispered. I'm tired. Clara's throat tightened. She unfolded the letter and held it up so he could see it. You wrote this, she said, 3 years ago. Caleb's eyes moved to the paper. A flicker of something passed across his face, shame, maybe, or regret. He closed his eyes. I wrote it the day I left the territory, he said. Thought about sending it 100 times. But I never did. Didn't think you'd want to hear from me. Didn't think I deserved to ask for anything. You didn't, Clara said. Her voice was quiet but firm. You don't. I know. She looked down at the letter, at the words written in his rough, unsteady hand. Words that had traveled with him across deserts and mountains and broken towns. Words that had never reached her until now. "Do you want me to read it to you?" she asked. Caleb opened his eyes and looked at her, surprised. "Why?" "Because you wrote it," she said. "And I think you need to hear it." He was silent for a long moment. Then he nodded. Clara cleared her throat and began to read. Her voice was soft and unsteady at first, but as she went on, it grew stronger. She read the confession, the apology, the truth about Samuel, about the rancher, about the men who had lied. She read it all the way through, and when she finished, she folded the letter again and set it down on the table beside the lamp. Caleb's eyes were wet. "Thank you," he said. Clara looked at him. "I don't forgive you," she said. The words came out harder than she meant them to, but she did not take them back. "I can't. Not for what you took from me. Not for the life I lost." Caleb nodded. "I don't expect you to. But I won't let you die alone," she said. "No one should die alone." Something broke in Caleb's face then, a crack in the wall he had been holding up for so long. A tear slipped down his cheek, and he turned his head away, as if ashamed to let her see it. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I'm so sorry." Clara said nothing. She sat back in a chair and folded her hands in her lap. The light outside was growing brighter now, the sky turning from gray to pale gold. She could hear the birds beginning to sing soft, distant calls that drifted in through the window. Caleb's breathing slowed. She watched as his chest rose and fell, each breath a little shallower than the last. His hand lay open on the blanket, fingers curled slightly, the branded scar visible even in the dim light. She thought about reaching out and touching it, thought about what it would feel like to hold the hand of the man who had stood by and let her husband die. But she did not. Instead, she sat with him in the silence, the way she had sat with Samuel on quiet evenings before the world had taken him from her. She did not speak, did not pray. She only bore witness. As the sun broke over the horizon, flooding the room with soft, golden light, Caleb took one last, slow breath. And then he was still. Clara sat there for a long time, staring at his face. He looked peaceful now, younger, somehow, as if death had lifted the weight he had been carrying. She reached out and gently closed his eyes, then pulled the blanket up over his chest. "Rest," she said quietly. She stood and walked to the window. Outside, the plain stretched endlessly in every direction, bathed in the warm glow of morning. The sky was clear and blue, the kind of sky that promised a hot day ahead. In the distance, she could see the cottonwood tree where Samuel was buried, its branches reaching up toward the heavens, its roots sunk deep into the earth. Clara took a breath and made her decision. She spent the morning digging. The ground was hard and dry, the dirt packed tight for months without rain. Her hands blistered. Her back ached. But she did not stop. She dug until the hole was deep enough, wide enough. And when she was finished, she went back inside and wrapped Caleb's body in the old quilt from the bed. She dragged him outside, one slow step at a time, and lowered him into the grave beside Samuel's. 2 graves now. 2 names. She stood there for a long time, looking down at the freshly turned earth. The wind moved through the cottonwood tree, rustling the leaves, and she thought she could hear Samuel's voice in it, quiet and kind, the way it had always been. She did not know if what she had done was right, did not know if mercy was the same as forgiveness, or if forgiveness was even hers to give. But she had made her choice, and she would live with it. Clara picked up the shovel and began to fill the grave. When she finished, she planted a simple wooden cross at the head of it, the way she had done for Samuel. She did not carve Caleb's name into it, did not mark it with words or prayers. But she knew it was there, and that was enough. She stood between the 2 graves, the sun warm on her face, the wind soft against her skin. She thought about revenge and justice, and the weight of carrying hate for too long. She thought about the man who had killed her husband and the man who had tried to stop it and failed. And she thought about the woman she wanted to be when the sun set again. Clara turned and walked back toward the house, leaving the dead behind her, not forgotten, but laid to rest. and, in the silence of the plains, she began the slow, painful work of learning to live again.